What's good? It's your new channel, Monkey D Pooky. Did a little rebranding. I liked One Pooks, but I think Monkey D Pooky, since it's my actual Bandai TCG tag, is a little bit better for the channel. So updated a little bit of stuff. You know, we're getting spicy. We're getting close to 100 subs. Like I said, I'm giving away Event Pack Volume 3. Ideally within Canada, but we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't think there's any charge for US shipping. So yeah, once we get to 100 subs, there's a giveaway for the Event Pack Volume 3. If you have never done a regionals and had access to these packs, it's not too expensive, but it's still fun to have, you know, so that's all I'm doing. I want to just give back to the community. In this video, we are looking at 2 underrated cards from each color. And I tried to separate them by what I think is going to be super relevant, maybe not in the future, but just things that you might not realize are really cheap alternatives to some great cards in these colors, and you can make them work really well. So let's just start it off with the red. So red, I'm looking at Buggy. One costs 3k power, which is really strong for a searcher. This card actually can only search red events, but there are quite a bit of red events. Early on when Ace was out, also for Whitebeard, I know they play this. This card is pretty, how do I say this? Pretty impactful. It's pretty much your best searcher. On 2 Dawn, you can play 2 1-drop searchers, fill your hand the right way you need it. You just need to make sure you order it correctly. And a lot of red decks, I think, are going to be starting to use more events, as well as cards that let you draw, because especially with Zoro, Dragon 2, those cards are going to be really strong at being aggro, reallocating Dawn, or even just power boosting, so that you can basically make this thing a 5k swing for a pretty small investment. So I think Buggy's a great card. It is being shown up in a lot of Whitebeard decks nowadays, so definitely scoop it, nice and cheap. It's just an uncommon from OPO3. Next card, Shanks. I think Shanks is one of the best boss monsters that Red has. The only other 10-drop we have access to is 10-drop Rush Luffy from the starter deck. That card's pretty strong, but you'll often see that unless your opponent's at 0 life, which they're probably not at 10 Dawn, they're just not going to block. They're not going to run the risk of getting their stuff KO'd. So at least with Shanks, you can pretty much, you know, if your opponent's on odd, they play a 9-drop. I don't think there's a 9-drop in the game that has more power than 10,000 when they play it. So I think this is probably a great card in that sense, because no matter what they play, if it's an 8 Dawn card like Eustace Kid, 9 Dawn card, you can just drop Shanks, kill something that's a threat, and hopefully, you know, in the rebuttal, when they come back at you, because you've used all your Dawn on a 10k monster, you're fine. You can then swing with 12k, or they have to spend a lot of resources removing it, which is pretty much about 6 Dawn for most decks. That's the KO spells. So I think both these cards are really cheap, worthwhile to have. Just pick them up, because they are cheap as hell right now. Even the alt arts for this one, the Buggy SP, looks beautiful, but it is still a little pricey because it's an SP card. So moving on to green, I'm going to start with this event. Billion Fold World Trichiliocosm, which is basically just the green version of Rad Beam, except it's a little bit easier to get out, because this only procs when you have 8 or more rested cards. So if you have one thing on the field, or at the very minimum you want 2 cards on the field rested, your leader, you can get this out for 5 Dawn rested on your field, because you'll have 2 rested characters, 1 rested leader, and then you need 5 rested Dawn. So on your 6 Dawn turn, you can have this active. I mean, even when you use the event, you're turning a Dawn to the side. So this could come out as soon as turn 5, or 5 Dawn. So I think it's really strong. Any 1 Dawn event that gives you +4 can basically keep you alive. And then if someone goes all out and tries to kill you because they think you have nothing on the board, well, this is basically a no, and you can honestly swing the game from there, especially if they start swinging with their blockers thinking they have it. Something to think about. The SR I want to highlight is Don Krieg. I think Krieg is crazy. I don't know why Perona decks aren't playing this. This card lets you trash 1 card from your hand, and in return you get to kill 2 rested 4-drops. So in Perona and Isho, which are green-black character leaders, both of them have a way to either drop the cost of characters, or with Perona you can manually rest something. Even Carrot coming out in OPO8 can do this. Bonnie can also rest things that they just played, but your opponent's probably not gonna do that. You're probably either gonna rest their leader and or the character that they swing with. So that's really awesome. This card basically kills 2 things off the board, and then also has double attack with the Dawn. So you can swing 8 K with double attack, which can be a huge threat for some decks. I really think it's useful in Perona, because Perona can tell you, hey, do you want a -1 or do you want to rest a 4? Because depending on what they have, if it's a 4 and a 5 rested, you can just -1 that 5, and then you kill 2 4s with this card. And it doesn't cost any Dawn from Perona. Very slept on card. A lot of OPO3 cards are kind of slept on. Definitely think you could run this, probably like $1 for this card, so buy a playset, why not? It's only $4, and then you can sub it in if you want. It's not East Blue restricted, which is great, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna get some more East Blue support within the next 2 sets. So when this card shoots up in price in like 6 months, come back to this video. I told you so. Moving on to blue, let's look at Crocodile. So Crocodile is a 7-cost 7k banish. Also has a Dawn 1 effect where blue cards, event cards in your hand cost 1 less. I've seen Nami decks like that Mill guy talk about this card. They've tried to mess with it, and it's a really strong card. A 7-drop 7k gets you out of the threshold from RP Law. RP Law can really hit 6k bodies easily with just a Gordon or a Raise Max. But with this 7k body, they kind of need to have a -4, and if they don't, then they have to have 2 1-drops to kill this. The other side of this is that your blue events cost 1 less to play, and as we know, blue has some of the most busted events in the game. It also has a counter, so unlike most of these SRs, in fact all of these SRs, this card is never dead in your hand. You can always get rid of it if you need to and just keep yourself alive. So this is a card that you can easily run 4 of in the deck and not be too stressed. Speaking of blue events, 3000 Worlds. Now I know we have 7-drop Raging Blade, Gravity Raging Blade Tiger. That card's really strong. 7-drop event, lets you bottom deck 2 6s. But the thing I've noticed is that most opponents won't play out 2 blockers, and if they do, that's just their fault against blue. If they play 1 blocker, and most of the time it's a 5 or a 4, this card's really great at just removing it immediately. There's no on-KO effect. Almost no blockers in the game can get around this except for like Basil Hawkins, except you're not going to be able to hit Basil with this event, which is completely fine unless you're playing black and blue. But that being said, if you need to go for game and you have 10 Dawn, this lets you basically get rid of a blocker, then put 6 Dawn around wherever you need to, depending on if you've played Crocodile and they have 1 life. Well, that's just a perfect 1 Dawn on Croc. Play this for 3. You basically paid 4, but now your Croc's a 8k banish, and then you can almost go, another Dawn on Croc, swing for 9 banish. If they can't stop that swing and they only had 1 life, that life goes to the trash. Then you can put 5 Dawn on your leader, swing 10 to life. Or even just, put Dawn around whatever characters you have on the field at this point. Really good at finishing up games, I think. This is a really slept-on card. The trigger is not the best, but I think the on-play is so much better. Moving to purple, and this card is definitely making its statement, only because Red-Purple Law is using it a lot. I think a 2 of maybe even 3. But I think for most purple decks, having a 5 Dawn play is fantastic. I'm a Red-Purple Luffy main, and from the first day I got that deck, I realized going on odd, playing Miss All Sunday to get up to 6 Dawn and drawing a card is so useful for the deck, because then next turn you're at 8 Dawn, leader effect up to 9, you can basically start doing your stupid 11 Dawn plays every turn. And I think every purple deck should be at least trying to run this. Maybe not Birdcage Dofi, that deck kind of wants you to neg Dawn instead, but at least with this card, you get a 5 cost, 5k, doesn't have a counter, so not the best, but drawing that Dawn and drawing that card are such a great advantage compared to other decks, as well as the fact that it has a trigger that at 8, 9, or 10 Dawn, you can basically play this thing for free, and you'll ramp a Dawn, ramp a card, and get a 5k body all in one. Really strong card. Pick it up ASAP because it is jumping. In that similar sense, I think Shiki, the Golden Lion, this is a 2-cost 1k blocker. Now I know chump blockers are not really the best, but in the sense that a lot of purple ramp cards, and you're playing purple, so you want to ramp up 2 big things, up to do big plays, strong plays. Having a card that lets you draw 1, trash 1, as well as be a blocker, can be really useful in the deck. It'll definitely be used in film decks that are purple, as well as things that splash. I know, 8 Dawn means you pretty much have to play 3 to 4 turns. I think, 4 to 5 turns, depending on if you're first or second. But it doesn't really stop it from being a blocker, as well as the fact that it's counterable. So If you really have to, you're playing green, yellow Yamato and you need to block that first swing, play a Shiki out. But later on in the game, when you start to brick out a little bit, playing Shiki, trashing that dead card you don't need and drawing into something that's useful only for the cost of 2 Dawn is super awesome. Super awesome, great, solid, fantastic card. The only other card I think I would talk about is, and in the same sense of drawing cards with purple, is this card, Kyoshiro. I know I don't really want to do 3 cards for 1 color, but if you have 8 or more Dawn, you get to just draw a card, and it's a 5/6, so there are some decks that just want you to flood the board with cards. I think this is a very slept-on card. I have been thinking about how I can run this in a deck. You have Purple Wano, which doesn't really have any synergy at this moment, but just being a 5/6, not horribly statted, comes with a counter, and then it actually has a beneficial on play if you play a late game. So think about that card as well. Moving on to black cards, and this is a card I hold dear to my heart. This is Helmeppo from Paramount War. Now this card is hilarious. It's a 3/3 with a 1k, and it has, when attacking, you can give one of your opponent's characters -2 cost. Then if there's a character with a cost of 0 in play, he gets plus 2k for the turn. So at the very minimum, this card is a 3 cost, give -2 to anything on the board. But if you're lucky and you have some way to reduce Dawn, reduce the cost of characters, this can just be a 3/5 that gives -2 out. It also comes with a trigger. So ideally, and the deck that I used to run this in all the time was Black Yellow Linlin, because this is just another trigger that you can get, that if your opponent can't remove a 3-drop off the field immediately, and they have a searcher, they play Hiyori to rearrange their life, anything, you can punish that 2 cost, 1 cost on the field and just keep getting 5k swings with this 3 cost free trigger body. Doesn't even require you to trash a card. Super slept on. It is just very easy for RP Law to bottom deck this thing, but in the cases that it comes out of life after they've used their Dawn Minus to like swing with Kid and Killer, etc., this card can actually win you games because of that plus 2k and the fact that you can -2 cost anything you want. In most decks, you might not find a place for this, but 5 life leaders, I definitely think this is a worthwhile run. In the same boat of underrated cost reduction cards, Isho. Now this card has been kind of fluctuating, hasn't really popped off just yet, but it's a budget version of Moria, and not because it can't recur anything, but it kind of does the opposite. Instead of you getting a card advantage or board advantage, you can play Isho, punish your opponent for having 6 cards, which isn't even a lot of cards in hand. The fact that most cards that punish hand size are like 7, this card literally will trash 2 cards from your opponent's hand, and then also, if you give it a Dawn, everything on their field gets -3 cost, which is insane. This is like getting Soap Sheep, the event, on a stick. As well as the fact that you're swinging 10k on your 10 Dawn turn, as well as the fact that you can pop anything on their field. Blockers tend to be 4s and 5s, so this card paired with a Lucci from Awakening of the New Era, this card right here, this card basically, in combination with Isho, can remove any blockers off the field and let you basically go for game. So very slept on card. Its alt art is about $30 right now. I definitely think it's worth picking up because it's seeing play in a lot of decks. Just as a 2 of, so if I were you, I'd just pick up 2 of these real quick, maybe even 3 depending on what decks you want to run. If you want to play Garp, which is, a coping dream that I love, I would play it because Garp's restriction is that they have to have 7 cost or lower to give his negative effect. So if you give a Dawn to Isho, everything's automatically a -3 cost, so all 10 drops are now 7s, so you can now give the -1 because you gave Isho a Dawn onto anything on their field, and it lets you honestly just do some crazy Dawn manipulation every turn, as well as the fact that you're trashing 2 cards from their hand. You could literally win the game because you trashed the 2 blockers they needed, or 2 2k counters, or whatever important combo pieces they needed to win the game. So that's that. Moving on to yellow, and I don't really have an SR of choice, unfortunately. Yellow has, Big Mom Pirates, Wano, we're about to get Egghead, and then we also have some Sky Island. But speaking of Sky Island, I think Gadatsu is one of the best cards. Gadatsu on curve into most leaders means you can pop a 3-drop or pop a 4-drop. And depending on if they're 5 life and they don't take their first life, that's popping a 5 drop. But even on curve, you only need to hit a 4. So either you just don't swing that first turn and play Gadatsu, or you're playing a leader that nobody expects would have Gadatsu in it. Maybe something like Queen, maybe something like, obviously, Yamato. If they take that first hit, they're going to be at low enough life where they're probably going to be scared anyway. So there's a lot of decks you could just pop this in and freak people out because you're just going to board control. So I think, when I was building Black Yellow Linlin, this was one of the only cards at the time in OP05 that could kill something with no restriction. I mean, the restriction is that it has to be equal to their life, but early on, that basically means you can pop a 3 or a 4, and later on in the game, you can still pop a 1 or a 2, which, if you're playing any splashy black, even, just being straight yellow, that can pop a chump blocker. If they have 2 life, that can pop like a Nami Dawn reallocator. It's honestly pretty versatile. And it's a 1k counter, and it's a 5/6, so pretty strong. But yeah, that being said, our final card, and this honestly goes for every zero cost event in the format. With OP06, we finally got yellow, a zero cost event, and all these zero cost events do the same thing. They trash 1 card from hand, and you get plus 3k. So no Dawn investment, you just need to have a card in hand that you want to trash. This is solid because it basically turns, and however you want to think about this, it turns a dead card into a 1k, making this a 2k for 0, or it turns that dead card into a 2k, turning this into a 1k, or even you just consider it trashing a card to get 3k. Regardless of how you think about it, this card turns dead cards into good, useful cards in your hand, as well as the fact that all these zero cost events have different triggers depending on their color. That's kind of the identity of the whole trigger part. So with this one, it has the best trigger, I would say, out of all of them, because if you have 0 cards, you get a free Enel effect. So depending on if you can mill your whole hand and then go down to your last life knowing it's this card, maybe you Hiyori'd last turn, you basically can heal for free because you won't have any cards in hand, because that trash 1 card happens after you gain a life. And with that being said, you can honestly, you can potentially hit 2 of these back-to-back, 3 of these back-to-back. It's kind of absurd. Or if you have a big enough hand, it doesn't really matter about trashing a dead card. If you have like 6 dead cards in hand, this is your last life. You're just getting rid of dead cards. Maybe you'll hit a Shirahoshi. Maybe you'll hit another one of these into a Shirahoshi, or into a Badge, or into Gastino. I think Gastino is also an honorable pick here because it's a 3/5. Depending on what kind of stall deck you want to play, you can just on play bounce the 3 costs to their life. Maybe a useful card like a Sugar. Maybe something else that can be a threat that they're not going to swing with until later on. And then you basically give them more life, but at the cost that a lot of yellow stuff likes having lots of life to deal with, because then your Gadatsu can hit a 4 or a 5. And then, if you I could get into it, but Yamato 2, the 9 drop, does some great work. So out of all these cards, I do think all of the zero cost events would make this list as well. The red one, I think, gives you plus 1k power for the turn for its trigger. The green one lets you kill a rested card, I think. Rested 4, I want to say. Yep, it's just rest of 4 cost, which is, green's identity. Purple one lets you ramp a Dawn. The blue one lets you bounce a 2 drop. And then the black one I kind of like. It's a 6 king pistol. You get to draw a card and then KO 1 cost. So all of them have really niche effects, but I think they're worthwhile to run in your decks. Just consider, if you don't have any zero cost events, just buying these, because they're all pretty cheap. There should be sub $1, except for this one. This one's pretty popular because it's used in pretty much every yellow deck, because we run a lot of big cards that are dead. So yeah, these are all the 12 cards, and then some extras that I think are really useful to pick up for new players. If you're planning on opening OP07, I think just having these in your collection will not restrict you. It'll only give you more options. And I guess, with these zero cost events, I could say the same about running 1 cost plus 4k power events, because there are all the colors have them, but not all of them are as great. The purple one, Dawn -1 to get the effect off. The red one just needs your life to be a little bit lower. The yellow one needs your opponent's life to be lower. The blue one requires you to trash a card. And then the black one needs you to have like 15 cards in the trash, which is a little bit harder to hit. But otherwise, if you're playing Lucci, it'll work. So consider all these cards, pick them up, get a nice copy of 4 of them. If it's SRs, you don't want to spend too much money, just get 2 of them, 3 of them. But I pretty much would say that getting 4 of all these cards would be useful in the future, especially if you don't even play this color, because for the most part, a lot of these SRs will get more support and become way more viable in the future. But yeah, it's your boy Monkey D Pooky. That's the video. Once again, giveaway at 100 subs. Event Pack Volume 3. If you didn't go to regionals, this is your best chance to get it. I'm going to figure out how to do the actual raffle, but we're slowly getting up there. As soon as we hit 90, I'll start actually like researching how to do a raffle on YouTube and yada, yada, yada. So yeah, thank you very much. See you.